the definition of hope and about our plan to make a world where anyone with a brain disorder can live openly with hope for their future. Now, you might be curious what I mean by a brain disorder. We use the term instead of mental illness because we think it more accurately reflects the physical changes that happen in the structures of our brain with these disorders. Before I go any further, I want you to know that this is a really special moment for me. I began my journey with a brain disorder diagnosis less than a mile from here. And people in this audience have helped me through every stage of that disorder. So you want to hear something crazier than me? The global leading cause of disability can be treated successfully 80% of the time. And the really crazy part is I think that's kind of cool. I mean, of course, it's not cool that people are disabled, but if people were disabled from a deadly virus or uncurable cancer, well, there wouldn't be a whole lot that we in this audience could do for them. But that's not the case. The leading cause of disability is from a disease that's as treatable as diabetes or asthma. One more time. We can successfully treat the global leading cause of disability, the second leading cause of death for American youth, and the cause of 121 people who die each day. We can successfully treat that 8 times out of 10. I think that is pretty cool. We just need to bridge the gap between treatment and the people who need it the most. So that sounds pretty simple, right? Well, as it turns out, it's not. You see, in order to bridge that gap, we need for those individuals that need help the most to be able to open up and ask for it. And in order for us to have them open up and ask for it, we need for them to disclose a secret that's so powerful and so stigmatized that people will often die before showing it. And I know that from experience. We can't fix the problem by bridging the gap. We have to fill it. We have to fill it with other individuals who are living successfully, who are willing to be open as well. I want to talk to you about one story about the power of being open. I found that after these talks, I meet some astonishing people and I hear some amazing things, but one stands out in particular. I did a talk at a local high school, and afterwards, a young woman came up to me, crying, and she said, "I'm really glad you came here today." You see, she was going to turn 18 1 week from that day, and her plan, up until that point, was to take her own life on her birthday. It's amazing how powerful something as simple as showing that someone can feel this way and experience this and still come out on top can be. Being open saves lives. And it's also a really big factor in one of my favorite topics, which is hope. Now, I'm not talking about hope as a verb. That's mostly wishful thinking and denial. For example, is anybody in the audience willing to give me free Broncos season tickets? Worth a shot. The hope I'm talking about is hope as a noun. It's a real, tangible thing. It cuts through stigma and it helps people to live their lives. The hope that I'm talking about is defined as a plan to add value to someone's life with the ability to overcome seen obstacles and the support and the confidence to overcome the unseen. That's the kind of hope that is the reason I'm still alive today. So now that you've seen the power of being open, and hope is a real, tangible thing, it's time I tell you what we've been up to at Sigmund, and what our plan is to create a world where we can live openly with hope. It seemed pretty surreal when Alexandra, who in my opinion, humble, is the best CEO and most talented CEO in this room, came to me with the opportunity to inherit the title of co-founder for Sigmund, and to take the ability to retool Sigmund from a mood tracking device to the company that we are today. And we found that people really liked what we do. We knew that we were on a short runway, but we had products that people were excited about. We knew that people liked who we were. And it seemed that we came across the same old lesson that when it comes to people, products, and marketplace, the marketplace always wins. Except that's not entirely true. The market may be product or people, but the movement that's evidenced by the people in this room, that movement can make the market. So we thought, what if we created a think tank for the support and solutions around brain health? What if we brought together the best of advocacy, of mentorship, of sponsorship, and of innovation? And we brought this together to create Open Labs. And what if we created Open Labs? Excuse me. But how could we do that? How could Alexandra and I create that innovative group? Well, what happens when we take 40 people on the bipolar spectrum and we put them together with a lot of experts from everything from neuroimaging to storytelling? What happens if we create an open summit with a design thinking workshop where these individuals can create the charter for Open Labs? And that's where we need your help today. If you're a company that wants to send a message saying, yes, I support my employees' brain health, and I want to build a community where they can be open, support the summit. If you're an individual who's been impacted with a brain disorder from a loved one, dedicate their name to the summit. And if you're an individual that's living on the bipolar spectrum successfully, we need your support the most. We need your big brains and your open hearts to set the foundation for Open Labs. I live openly with hope, and I can't tell you how free that feeling is. It's a feeling that I want for everyone in the audience and in this community that lives with a brain disorder. And now I'm asking for the support of this community, the community that's helped me to be in a position where I can live openly and with hope, to once again help with the other individuals who are also living with brain disorders. I know this community, I know how powerful it is, and I know that together there is nothing that can stop us from fixing this problem. I also know that there are far too few opportunities for a slow clap in this world. So if we could start, everybody in the audience who lives with a brain disorder, we're gonna have you start off any kind of brain disorder, anxiety on the spectrum, you name it. Let's go ahead and start off with a slow clap. Nice. Anybody who's affected by someone that they love. And finally, give it up for Brad, Jared, and Alexander. Thank you guys so much.
That was nice work. Okay, so I'm going to explain the format for this discussion, and then I'll introduce our speakers, Brad Feld and Jerry Colonna. I guess our heads are blocking these descriptions a little bit, so we will explain these to you. This is going to be a totally audience-driven session. So I have some questions I've collected in advance from the audience, and then we have mic runners on either side who are going to be answering any, or handing you the mic so we can have any questions that you have answered. So we're dividing this into 3 sections. 1 is personal experience with brain disorders. 2 is as an employer or a founder. And then the last one is the overall industry as a venture capitalist. I'll announce them before we go, but try and keep your questions to the different topics, so that way we get everything covered. But yeah, our heads are in this a little bit. So let's start off with personal experiences. Do you two mind just introducing yourselves and talking a little bit about your personal experience with what we call brain disorders, but mental health in general?
Sure. I'm a survivor of suicide attempt. 2 suicide attempts. And I am the son of a woman with, she's passed, schizoid affective disorder, bipolar disorder, and a father who is alcoholic And I won't bore you with the rest of the family story, but it's long. So,
Brad Feld. The clinical diagnosis I have is obsessive compulsive disorder, which I had or got in my mid-20s in the midst of a 2-year depressive episode, which was the first depressive episode that I had that I was aware of. Okay. I've had 2 other major extended depressive episodes as an adult, one in my mid-30s right after 9/11, and then one at the end of 2012 for the first 6 months of 2013, at which point I was very public that time. The first depressive episode I had a successful business that I was bored of. I had just or gone through a divorce or was in a divorce with my first wife, and I had been kicked out of a PhD program. I also hadn't, in hindsight, really separated from my parents, especially my father. And the value linkage there is that I was incredibly ashamed of being depressed. I was ashamed of going to a psychiatrist. I was ashamed of taking medication, really, really deep struggle with it. And I was really fortunate that my now wife, Amy, who became my girlfriend, was very patient with me through that. And that my business partner, a guy named Dave, who didn't really know what to do with it, was also very, in his own way, supportive and empathetic, which definitely came in use about 15 years later when he went through a divorce and had an extended depressive period. So I would say that the last piece that's relevant is I'm the son of 2 happily married people for a long time, but they fit a nice cliche. We're very, very close, but they are Jewish parents. And whatever the cliche follows from that, that is what they are. They are not the Jewish parents that said when you came home with a 97, what happened to the last 3 points? But there was an awful lot of that dynamic that played into it. And at 51, fortunately, my parents are both still alive. Understanding myself in relationship to them has been very powerful as part of the whole destigmatizing mental health for me.
oh, and I forgot to say I'm Jerry Colonna.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. So I'm going to kick it off with one question, and then audience, just get prepared to ask your own, and our mic runners will get the mic to you. So I know, Brad, in a couple of talks, you've mentioned that people confide in you, people who are maybe not even in the state but are in sort of high-level positions. And this question's for both of you. So you're both extremely successful and have been able to be open about your conditions, disorders. So what advice would you give to someone who's maybe not in a position of authority, who might be more fearful about speaking out about their condition?
Well, I'm not sure that position of authority is the way I would segment it. I recognize, and I've learned a lot in the last couple of years about specifically privilege and the context of privilege. And from Jerry and my friendship with Jerry, Jerry's been effective at confronting me, I think is probably the best word, but in a constructive way with some of the boot camps we've done about my own ambiguous relationship to power. And one of the challenges, I think, especially for someone who is struggling with anxiety or depression or any other brain disorders, I like the phrase a lot, by the way. I hadn't heard it before tonight or hadn't thought about it that way before tonight.
Well, we like mental fitness, so we kind of carried on that.
Mental fitness is good too, is that there really is an interesting disconnect, at least for me, between your ability to help someone else and your position of power. And in a lot of cases, there's an inverse relationship because of the stigma associated with it. And so when you're in a position of power, and it doesn't matter whether it's parental or business, and you're interacting with someone with, or socioeconomic, you're interacting with someone who is struggling, oftentimes one's ability to be empathetic and to engage is low when you're in that position of power. When you're in the subordinate position, I'd actually suggest that your ability to be empathetic to somebody that's in a position of power or privilege is also low, which is something I've encountered, which is, the equivalent of, hey, Feld, what the fuck's wrong with you? Like, why are you talking about being depressed? You've got plenty of money, you've got, a loving wife, and, get your shit together, which for anybody that's experienced this stuff is kind of the most unhelpful thing. So I think I'd just separate the thought process a little from power, and then go to the next layer, which really still impacts me at this stage. My father, when I was going through this depression in my late 40s, he had his 75th birthday. We have this big birthday party with my family. We go to San Antonio. I have no idea why we went to San Antonio. And my dad is there, and he still can't relate to me not just struggling with depression and anxiety, but talking openly about it. My mother's comment to me is, "Why do I have to find out that you're depressed from your blog? Don't you know you can call me?" And I'm like, I think it's easier to tell you from my blog, maybe. My father, as I'm really deep in this, he has his birthday. I'm like taking all my energy to, not enjoy myself, but to show up for his 75th birthday. We're together for some reason, walking between things, and he says to me, "Why do you tell everybody that you're depressed?" And I said, Dad, I'm not in a place where I have a logical thought process around that. He says, "All you're doing is arming the bad guys. Like, they're just going to use it against you." And I said to him, "Dad, anybody that wants to use it against me, fuck them." Right? And but that took me 25 years to get to that place. I wasn't at that place when I was 25 years old and struggling with it. So I think it's very nuanced against, I'm not answering the direct question, but it's nuanced against this notion of power. I think you can be very powerful and be in a subordinate relationship with other people in the context of this. I think you can be not very powerful and be in a subordinate relationship. So my punchline, the encouragement is, when you're depressed or when you're struggling with any kind of brain disorder, seek out people who can relate to you as a human rather than objectify what you're going through against the backdrop of what's normal or what they perceive to be normal.
Can I jump in on this? So I had a thought when Lance was speaking about hope, and I loved your explication around that. And I would add to hope the notion of compassion and empathy, both as verbs and as nouns. And my first reaction to your question was, so we're going to ask I'll identify myself, right? We're going to ask the cisgendered white male, economically safe fellow to, because I identify as male, to suggest something to someone else who might not identify as any of those things. And what I loved about Brad's response was it was a response built around empathy. It was in this moment that Brad references, where at one of our boot camps we played with the notion of power, and it was within the context of having received an email. I received an email about Brad, which was, what does he have to complain about? He's bulletproof. And having been on the receiving end of his phone calls, he's not bulletproof, no matter what people may project onto him. And the people in this room who are here, perhaps intellectually, because we're curious and maybe there's some answer, but really because their heart is kind of open, none of us are bulletproof. None of us are. And all I can offer, I have no advice to someone who doesn't have the power and privilege that I have, because I don't know what it is completely to walk in your shoes. But I can tell you I will listen. and I'll keep my heart open. And I think that, lastly, I think we who do have some power and privilege, we have a kind of moral obligation to use that, not from a guilt perspective, but from a responsibility perspective, from a sense of we're shared human beings. None of us are bulletproof. And here's the way in which I am not bulletproof. And maybe my sharing that creates a little bit of space for you. And that's my hope.
Yeah, no, those are great responses. And I think that probably what this is driving at in your response to the audience member's question is, I mean, look at the room that we're sitting in right now. We have, would love to have more diversity, but there is more diversity than is on this stage. And so I think just looking to your peers in the audience, and people are here for a reason. They're probably willing to share things, and maybe it could be, like you said, finding those conversations where it resonates. And there's different examples from everyone in the audience, not just on this stage as well. Awesome. So do we have any audience questions? We can open it up there. Great.
Hi, my name is James. I was clinically depressed for 6 years, the majority of my adult life, from 18 until actually probably about 7 years. So since last year, I'm 26 now. One of my biggest challenges was that as an empathetic person, I often absorbed the moods and the challenges of other people and often made it my own. And it was at a time when my parents went through a divorce, my dad went through a bankruptcy, and my mom was a very emotional person, and I was the oldest child. And I had younger siblings who I needed to take care of because she was away working, so I'd take them to school. And that was really challenging for me. And now I founded my first company about 2 weeks ago. But I'm still kind of dealing with the challenge of absorbing other people's own challenges and moods and not having it be a reflection of myself. Do you have any advice, or is there anything that you do that helps you overcome those things?
Two things from my perspective, and then I know Jerry can identify this because of the work that he does on a daily basis. I want to start with the most profound thing my mother has ever said to me. So, again, go back to the cliche. My mother's awesome in a lot of ways. My mother's has deep-rooted anxiety, but denies the anxiety. Very classic, right? And you have anxiety, but you press it away, which in some ways creates a negative feedback loop. And if I had ever confront her about it, I'm not anxious. I've got no anxiety. The most profound thing she ever said to me one day, I was driving into Boulder. I remember exactly where I was because I was just cresting the hill on University. And she said to me, we were talking about something, and somehow anxiety came up, and she says, "Oh, I just give all my anxiety away to everybody else." That's how I do it. And I said, I literally said, I paused, and I let there be silence. I said, "Mom, that is the most profound thing you've ever said to me." One of the challenges for me is not anymore so much absorbing other people's emotions continuously, although there are periods of time where my own internal anxiety is inappropriate. I actually refer to them as inappropriate anxiety spikes. So I have something going on, like whatever my normal cadence is, and I'm sort of manage whatever, and then something happens, and I get this giant spike. It's not a little spike, it's a giant spike, and it's usually because something's happening that someone else is responsible for or is going to impact someone else, and I'm absorbing it. And oftentimes it's accumulation of a lot of stressors. And also for me, it's often accumulation of I like to say my physiology is fucked up. Like I'm off kilter in some way. I've known this instinctively for a long time, but it hasn't been until relatively recently that I've been able to do, and again, I'm 51, so relatively recently that I've been able to do anything proactively about it. And the proactive thing that I do, I would categorize as self-care. It's not that I try to deny the absorption of this other emotion. It's not just anxiety, by the way, but it usually culminates in this anxiety. It's not that I try to suppress it. It's not that I try to resist it. It's that I make sure that when I see the spike, or I even see the accumulation of it, that I take care of myself. And there's lots of different tactical things that means. An example for me was I was that guy who woke up at 5 a.m. no matter what, in every time zone. I had this weird macho feedback loop about not needing a lot of sleep and self-aggrandizement around this notion of how hard I was able to sort of power through my fatigue. And every year around October or November, I would crash. And it was just a cycle, and I kind of rationalized it. And when I said the conscious 3 depressive episodes, I think I was probably depressed every year in the November, December time frame my entire adult life. But I didn't acknowledge it. I didn't see it as that. I saw it as a natural part of my own cycle. What I have now is enough awareness when that's coming that I shut down a bunch of the things that are negative self-care. Right, the alarm clock is a good sort of long arc example. I got rid of alarm clocks. I don't wake up with an alarm. I haven't since I was depressed. You say, well, how can you do that? How can you possibly live your life if you don't wake up with an alarm clock? And the answer is you just change your point of view, and you change the way you start your day. Or I tell Amy, look, tomorrow I got to be at the office by 10. If I'm not up by 9:30, wake me up. So it's figuring out these things that allow me to create space for myself and give myself self-care without feeling any guilt, without feeling like I'm letting other people down, but knowing I need to do it for myself. And the last part of this is when people go through Techstars, I give a talk often about how to survive the 90 days of Techstars in a healthy way. And I say, every day, I don't care if you have a family or not, or you're alone, you're single. Every day, create an hour for yourself for just you. If you like ice cream, and I love to tell this to the people in New York, I say, how many different ice cream places are within walking distance of the Techstars office in New York? 100. I say, go sample them all, one a day. Say, if you like TV and you like gripping TV, watch Battlestar Galactica, not the one from the 70s, the one from 2004. After 90 days, you'll have watched the most epic TV show ever in the history of TV shows. Right? If you like yoga, do yoga, but don't do the same yoga every day. Go to a different yoga place and try different things. But give yourself an hour. And then if you have a family, give your family an hour of you. Because the mistake so many people make is that they give that hour for themselves, they give to their family, their friends, somebody else, and they don't let that self-care roll into that.
So if you've listened to my podcast, you'll hear me use this term. So your empathy is a superpower. Okay? And what Marvel has done a fantastic job doing is teaching us that every superhero's superpower has a dark side and a light side. And what the X-Men, more than anyone else, have learned is that when the superpowers are misunderstood, we are denigrated. Your capacity to feel the room was a childhood survival strategy. It may even be genetically structured within you. I don't know enough about neuroscience. But from the little you shared about your parents, and by the way, entrepreneurs are often early parentified. They are early promoted. It's just a phenomena that happens. That helps shape you. And the question that you hold is, you have this superpower, what shall you do with it? Not what should you do, obligatory. What shall you do with it? What's your opportunity? There's a useful visual aid that I use, which is put crazy in your life on the other side of the fence. Right? And we all got them. We all got them. They're on the other side of the fence. And the fence has a gate. And it's open. and you can see and you can love and you can care for and you can acknowledge them on that side of the fence, and it has a gate, and you're the only one with the key. And it only opens such that you can let them in when you need to let them in. And using self-care, using a self-awareness and operating instructions, what I need is, like when I leave here, I'm an introvert. It will be hard for me to engage. And so I'm going to go out to dinner with my friend Jesse. And we're going to laugh, and we're going to talk, and we're going to, right? And that's going to be connecting. Does this have resonance for you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? When the superpower is not well integrated into our bodies, into our experience, it can lead us down a path of existential depression because we feel so much. You're not broken. Okay? It's just where you are in this moment in your relationship with that superpower.
Thank you.
We can take another question too. Thank you.
Yeah, my question's on the viewer's right, so the future of brain health as an industry, and I'm wondering if just for a few minutes we could get like business tactical a little, even though like many people in the room, I've been there already, like this is done, I'm out kind of experiences, but what I'm worried about is, and what I think about every day now is viral versus sticky growth strategies. And I'm wondering if you guys have seen pockets, at least already, of more sharing on the platforms that we have for viral growth, or for at least some word of mouth growth around the tools and services that help. I work with athletes on their brain health, and they are happy to post awesome photos of themselves. They happen to all look pretty great too. And those get tons of likes, but they never share what they're seeing every day from my company, which is, their inner lives. Stickiness is good enough for now, but I'm curious if you guys are starting to see, some more virality around the industry and some growth happening there.
I don't feel like I have a great answer, but I have an example that might lead to some learning. The one category where I've seen real viral and word of mouth growth around an app is around meditation apps. And there's two in particular, one that I think Jerry's an investor in, right? You're an investor in Headspace. And then the other one is one I'm a tiny investor in called Calm. And I'm a user of Headspace. I like Headspace better than Calm, even though they're both good. And one of the things that's been powerful about that is that they're not meditation apps, they're mindfulness apps. And one of the challenges with anything like that is, and Jerry taught me this language, is meditation is called a meditation practice because you don't never get good at it, you just practice. And your goal is not to become great at meditation, your goal is to practice. And one of the things that's very powerful about each of these apps is that they have very good self-reinforcing usage loops. So you engage with it, but they don't have measuring that makes you feel negative when you're not engaged. So I'll go through stretches where I'll meditate every day using Headspace for 20 minutes, and then I'll go through stretches where I won't. And I don't feel like I'm a bad user of the app. And it's not constantly reminding me to come back and do things unless I choose to have it do that. So like figuring out how to build that loop in a constructive, positive way versus the way so many of the feedback loops work with Facebook and Twitter, where it's sort of like you're pressing the classic dopamine button to get more info. My guess is there's lessons in that and how that works, especially around something that is more personal, that is more individual versus, the classical problem of Facebook is look how awesome my life is. And that's what you get on Facebook. Look at the beautiful photograph I took. Look at the incredible video of me doing something awesome. And it's just, I don't know what percentage of it's bullshit, but people aren't posting and then things suck. My favorite stuff, for example, to post on Facebook is when I'm miserable on an airplane somewhere. I post a selfie of me, on a plane looking
Your Australia
miserable.
trip.
Right? Because nobody ever posts and it sucks right now. Although teenagers do, right? And I like to say on Twitter, everybody bitches about their travel problems. But it's trying to figure out a way to have a positive feedback loop that has some emotional intimacy rather than check mark or score.
Yeah. I can't comment on the virality of trends right now because other than Headspace, I really have not been an active investor for many years. But I'll bring your attention to something that comes to mind here because we were just chatting about, teenagers and stuff. And there's a woman named Nancy Lublin who was for many years the executive director at Do Something, CEO at Do Something, although she called herself Chief Old Person. And she spun out of Do something called Crisis Text Line, which she's going to be a guest on my podcast in a few weeks. And Crisis Text Line, which Reid Hoffman put a shit ton of money in, is an amazing expression of using powerful new technologies in a viral way to address some core issues. And in that conversation, we talk about, okay, so it was really targeted at the folks who live on text, sort of young adult, kind of my kids versus, say, me. And I'm doing this, by the way, because I can't see. But, no, that's all right.
Can we turn that down, that light that's up on the top there?
It's the projector.
Got it.
It's that.
It got brighter, I feel like. I don't think it...
Yeah. But
That's, if you want to turn it off, that's totally fine. Yeah.
so, thank you. I feel like Cyclops. Oh, much better. Now I can't see anything. But anyway, that's a really interesting thing. And I think that there's a broad application for the uses of things like Crisis Text Line throughout sectors of industry. So one of the things might be to talk to your clients about finding ways to communicate with one another. Because really what we're talking about is perhaps there's an opportunity, aside from solving brain disorders, of which technology has some really interesting promise, what we're talking about is community support and people helping each other in that way.
So I have a follow-up question to that. So Jerry, I know you said you aren't actively investing or haven't been in that world for a little bit, but when you think about Reboot and sort of the future of your business, are there technological advancements or just different things that you think about as sort of the next wave or where people will be investing, whether that's money, time, or whatever in your industry?
And my industry being executive coaching, learning and development, organizational support, that sort of thing. It's a complex question. There's a lot of folks come to Reboot, come to me with ideas for, hey, here's an automated coach system, or how do you find answers to questions, or mood tracking, as we talked about. And I think that those things, I think that there are two kinds of broad buckets that I still remember back in my day. Remember my analog? Right?
I still use it all the time.
So this was a phrase I came up with, which was, what's the analog, the non-digital analog to whatever is going on? And the non-digital analog of what we're talking about is human interaction, humans. There's technology, and then there's technology that enables human interactions, and they're two different buckets. And there's awesome new technologies that change lives, and there's technology-enabled services that change lives, right? And the latter is probably the most promising area, right? I see a dog in the room, and I don't mean to make presumptions, but the notion of a service dog, perhaps, that helps people, that feels resonant to me. That feels like we do feel like we're more accepting in society of things like that. And that's where, in a weird way, maybe that's technology. That's what technology can play. You know, as a way to help the experience of being human, as opposed to exacerbate the problems of being human. I hope that was clear.
Yeah, thank you. Do we have any other audience questions? And we kind of shifted where we were. If we have any specifically about the industry and venture capital and where that's going, if we could keep our hands raised for that one so we can kind of cover that topic. Do you have one in the front there? Great, thank you.
I was wondering if you know of any programs that are businesses that are focusing on the impact on children of these issues, because I direct an after-school program that involves science and art. And what we started doing this year was focusing more on psychology. And after we started doing this certain activity that we do to start, I've had parents come up and tell me that some of the children are already in therapy. And so we're giving somewhat, I'm looking for any other businesses or avenues where we might get more information about providing some kind of support to children who are facing some kind of mental challenges.
In terms of specific companies, I don't have a list, but there are two vectors that I think over the next 5 to 10 years have a lot of richness in them. We've seen a bunch being, more than 5, less than 20, companies that are trying to build some kind of physical device that kids with any sort of, and usually different categories of brain disorders can interact with. And it's not a robot and it's not a toy, right? But it's something that has a structured dynamic when the child is still at a developmental level where the brain is still developing, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, where it has different kind of impact. And I'd say that there's clearly plenty of science going on around that. I think there's some entrepreneurs who maybe are not focused on the science, but are playing around with some of the sort of surface level things that come out of the science. I've seen this particularly, one that I have in my head that I saw relatively recently was for autistic kids. And it was a different way of getting them to engage with the physical world in a non-threatening way. So I'd say that there's a bunch of that's physical devices. And then the other, which we see, I don't like the label because I think the label is too confining. But if you think about STEM education, and you think about STEM education against things like learning how to program, which really at a childhood level is more about learning how to make logical inference, right? Start with this and put some things together that result in a thing that does this. And they could be software, but they could also be physical products like what Sphero has with their Spark product. We're investors in a company called Little Bits that has a similar kind of dynamic. I think there's a layer on top of that, right? The actual product itself is interesting as a starting point. There's a layer on top of that where I've seen it in classrooms where teachers are designing things for their students in the elementary school level that that encourage the students to collaborate in ways that they wouldn't without that sort of technology. So again, not specific companies, but it feels like that vector. I'm going to link it back to something Jerry said and use the dog as the example. I don't think we're close to a world where the human interaction dynamic is suddenly replaced. I think we're in a place where the human interaction dynamic is enhanced. And I think it's enhanced on 2 dimensions. One dimension is just the understanding of what works from a scientific perspective. And the other is the interactive effects between kids when they're collaborating on something that's based in this environment versus, go play tetherball or go play soccer, go play football, where, the child who is not able to engage I didn't realize it, but I'm sure that I was I was a social kid with one other person. With a group of people, I didn't really want to be part of a group of people. And I kind of learned, I grew up in Dallas, Texas. I had to learn how to be social with a group of people because of sports. But I was always super, super agitated before and agitated after. And it was totally because of OCD. I didn't want to be touched. I didn't want to be in physical contact with a bunch. I could one-on-one relate. And so I think it sort of changes some of those models so that it's not the same, oh, go outside and play, but work on this other thing. I don't think we shift dramatically in the next 5 or 10 years. I think we get a lot of enhancement, and I think we should look for that. I don't know if that's a good answer or bad answer, but that's what I think.
And the only thing I would add is I got super excited. Like my heart started racing when you spoke. So thank you for that. You know, I'm a parent. My children are adults. My children are adults. My children are adults. I have to remember that.
You've done your work, Jerry.
No, they're not. Yes, they are.
Now it's up to them to fuck up all on their own.
Be kind to your mother. But the whole notion of helping to grow healthier humans, that gets me really, really excited. You know, teaching our little humans how to speak about their feelings, yeah, right? Like awesome. Teaching folks who are different places on the brain experience, whether they are quote unquote autistic or whatever label structurally that we teaching, helping them find a way to be in that experience in a different way is really exciting to me. There's this wonderful book series called Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Has anybody read this book? Do you know the story behind this book? So Rick Riordan wrote the book. This is where I stole the superpower idea. Rick Riordan, you know this, right? He wrote the book for his son, if I remember, who's on a spectrum. And those on the spectrum are demigods. Isn't that awesome? They're special. What a beautiful, beautiful message. What a beautiful message. I mean, to me, that feels like an expression. That's not tech. It's not a company. But it's the notion of like, let's start at stigma when they're like munchkins. It's great to end bullying. What if we experienced a classroom that dropped language around traditional male-female identity? You must be in this bucket. Normal, not normal. Like, what the fuck? The fuck? They're just humans.
So what do you think, I'm curious, so, you know, as an adult in the world, there's all these programs that could be designed for classrooms and things like that, but what can we be doing to set an example or just things in our everyday lives? It feels like there's great things like the conversation we're having now, right? But is there more, or are there communities that you've seen that are setting this example like what you're talking about really well that we can replicate? Just wondering kind of what are the action items and to-dos we can do coming out of this?
So I'm a huge believer in the notion of what I label cultural norms. And I'll use this in the context of a company. One of the great things for me about entrepreneurship is that you as entrepreneurs are creating your own company, and you get to define the cultural norms. That's different than defining the culture. And I've always hated the labeling things like that, saying, well, you know, we have a culture here, and we only hire people that fit the culture. And I actually encourage people to encourage CEOs that I work with and entrepreneurs I work with to hire people that fit the not culture, right? Get people on your team that are not like everybody else on the team, especially early on. You're defining your cultural norms, which is essentially your value system, your articulation of your value system. But you want diversity across that very, very quickly in the company, and you want this inclusiveness, and for those of you that know the Boulder thesis and have heard me talk about startup communities, this notion of being inclusive, and you can pick your adjective, right? Radically or adverb, radically inclusive, as well as just sort of inclusive across all dimensions. Like, you have to have this very open mind to what everybody's bringing to something, having that be different, against the backdrop of the cultural norms you're trying to create. So in terms of something tactical, we're living now in a country, right? And I won't go down a political rat hole, I promise. I'll try not to go down a political rat hole. But we're in a country right now where the cultural norms that exist are very segmented, right? It's not uniform cultural norms across our country. And if you want to have an experience of this, you can do this in 2 hours, and you'll have the most amazing explanation of this in 2 hours. Go sit down, get whatever your favorite alcoholic beverage or now legal substances, and watch in 15-minute increments, 15 minutes, and 15 minutes, and 15 minutes, and 15 minutes, at the end of a day, CNN and Fox News. And alternate for 2 hours, 15 minutes CNN, 15 minutes Fox News, 15 minutes CNN, 15 minutes Fox News. And especially, again, something that's just happened that's created another kerfluffle. And what you realize is we have completely different cultural norms. And you can make a judgment as to whether one's better or worse. That's not what this thought process is about. But in the context of what you can do is be emotionally and intellectually inclusive of people with different cultural norms against the backdrop of this challenge. Because one of the problems is, on the stigma end of the spectrum, it's, oh, I feel the stigma, I can't share. The bad guys are going to get you, Brad. My dad's saying that to me. And then at the other end of the spectrum is this notion of, that person, person X, I don't know if anybody here knows Aaron Schwartz, but Aaron Schwartz, who famously committed suicide, was unable to, as an entrepreneur, unable to talk to anyone about the struggle he was having. And so this notion of tactically being open on that spectrum, whatever it is, and trying to engage with, again, this notion of inclusiveness across all of it, I think is what we can tactically do. From that, I'll end on this, from that, I don't think it's very comfortable for me. I've had several people say this about different issues, like I say, diversity would be an example, mental health would be an example. Hey, Brad, you should do blah. And I always have an immediate tightening to that. And I'll go back to where Jerry started, right? Diversity is an easy one. Let's take it out of the mental health range. I happen to be a 51-year-old Jewish guy. Like, my only, I'm 99% Ashkenazic Jew and 1% Asian. So I get to claim Genghis Khan as one of my great ancestors, having done 23andMe. But I was having a conversation the other day with an organization that I hosted a dinner for called Path Forward. Jerry was at, it's an organization to help women who have been out of the workforce for 5-10 years get back into the workforce. It's quite hard to do because of what's called the resume gap. And I started by saying, look, I claim that I'm a 51-year-old privileged white guy. That doesn't mean that I can't engage in this. There's only one thing I can do to change the fact that I'm a 51-year-old white guy, and my wife Amy doesn't want me to do that. But that doesn't mean that I don't engage in this dynamic. And I think we're really lucky in Boulder, by the way, because we have a place where the cultural norm fits really well against that. But spreading that cultural norm beyond Boulder is really powerful.
Thank you. Do you have anything on that, Jerry? Good. Okay. So we have time for just a couple more questions. Awesome. We have one in the front row here.
Hi. So let's say I'm the CEO of a large organization. I've been CEO of this company for many years, and I can define that I'm neurotypical, as Alexandra likes to say. And one of my direct reports, who's the head of people and culture at my organization, just walked in the room to meet with me for a sync up and just disclosed that she has bipolar disorder. Time stops and you two walk in the room and you're able to give him some advice on how to absorb this information and actually have a very useful conversation for this individual so they leave the room feeling inspired, empowered, and that they still have their job and maybe accommodated for. So what advice would you give a neurotypical person who's receiving all of this openness in that situation?
What's the problem? I mean, whose problem is it? Does she have a problem?
Yes, let's say that the work day, she's required to show up at 8 and stay until 6 or 7, and she's manic depressive and she needs some time away, maybe once a week or every few weeks in the month to decompress and maybe be at home working alone or something like that. So she needs to figure out.
What if her situation was a non-stigma producing situation? What if she had childcare issues?
Perfect.
Right.
Why not?
I mean, my point is this. This is a great opportunity for creative conversation and engagement that says, great, so what do you need to succeed? I'll bet you she knows better than you. Right, Lance? Right. I understand. I don't mean to. I apologize, but notice what happens, which is the immediate this is a big piece of information. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. Maybe it is for you. Maybe it's not for the other. I don't know. We don't know. We have a saying at boot camp, which is #GetCurious. Especially when you find yourself ready to jump in and fix, solve, respond. Stay open, stay curious.
I'll reinforce what Jerry said. As a leader who's been in lots of different contexts, lots of different situations, many of which I would have never anticipated being on the receiving end of a particular conversation. And as an investor, often finding myself talking with a CEO who finds herself in that kind of a position, that's a first, and that is loaded for whatever reason, including self-reflective loadedness, right? This person is showing up with a challenge that they see in themselves, or it's a challenge that they are denying, but it's one that their parents had. Drinking and drugs are a super loaded version of this that I see a lot, where you have a high-performing person on your team that has substance abuse problems, and you just can't deal with it. And the reason you can't deal with it is because one of your parents had a substance abuse problem. So it's all of these sorts of linkages. And what I encourage people to do, and what I try to do myself when I find myself on the receiving end, is what Jerry said in terms of get curious, leading to trying to look at what the person's telling me with no judgment, zero. Often knowing that the conversations become emotional. And when conversations become emotional, the person who is emotional is almost always feeling judged. In a work context, I cry in a work context, and most people are not okay with that, right? And the number of times I've been in a room where the person that I'm with has cried and apologizes for crying in a work context. I mean, they don't cry and then not apologize. The male reaction oftentimes is to yell and scream and throw shit at you. It's the same reaction, right? So it's to try to be present and without judgment, try to find out what the person wants and what they need, and quickly give them, as long as it's reasonable in the context of, what the work is, both what they need and then reinforcement that it's okay. Because oftentimes the first thing they need is not what they need. It's the next or the next or the next, and you can't get the person there unless they feel comfortable. Last comment, I have this happen to me at least once a week, where I'm on the board of a bunch of companies, at least once a week somewhere with a founder, a CEO, or a senior exec that I interact with, is after the interaction, the person has such palpable relief that they actually can now go address what their core issue is. But they were unable to address it in advance because they were so fearful of what the reaction would be. And just by having a non-judgmental reaction, it's not support. It doesn't have to be cloying, and it doesn't have. It's just real. Like, be empathetic. Show up. That person's anxiety. Okay, now it's out there. Now I can start working on this. And so the last thing I'd leave you with is recognize it's not a one-turn game. You're not done after that meeting. I had something difficult happen a couple of days ago. And I went into the person today and said, "How you doing?" I didn't say, "Are you good? How's it going?" Right? I said, "How are you doing? How are you feeling?" With clear linkage to the thing that had happened that was difficult and uncomfortable. So it's, as a leader, knowing that that's part of the job of leadership is to keep working on that.
Yeah, I think you both made excellent points there that I want to follow up with, but I also want to be cognizant of our speakers' time, and I know Boulder Startup Week is very busy. So please stay seated, because I do have a few things that I would like to announce, but thank you so much. Round of applause for everybody.
I'm gonna rush out because I'm now 20 minutes late to the board dinner that I had tonight. But I think most people know this, but if you don't, brad@feld.com. If there's something that you didn't ask or want to talk about, or something I can be helpful with, or you just want to engage on, feel free to email. I'll try to be responsive. And thank you for being interested, and hopefully this was useful. And Jerry, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alexander. My email is brad@feld.com.
And if you say you want to get to Jerry, just put that in the first line of 42.
It actually works. I think that's how we got connected. So, but I'll let you two. I know you have things to do as well. So feel free to hop off. But please, everyone, stay seated for a little bit so I can announce a few things.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, so big thank you to everyone who helped out with this event. We could not have done it without you. So round of applause for all of our volunteers and all of our speakers. Thank you. Awesome. And our ask of you today is to keep this conversation going, right? That was such an amazing panel, but a very, very short amount of time. So look at the other people in the room. These are your peers to continue these conversations. So there's 3 different ways that you can stay engaged. 3 different ways we can transition the slide and stay engaged. Cool. So 1, if you'd like to attend, sponsor, or dedicate to the summit, this is a number you can text with your name, and then 1, 2, or 3 for attend, sponsor, or dedicate. And that's also a good number to text. I know the giveaway got a little bit messed up with some of the links, so feel free to also text that number if you'd like to enter the giveaway for a packet with Amy Reikland's coaching, also Andy O'Connor's speech coaching. Impact Founder is doing a feature as well that we mentioned, and the ticket to the Open Summit. So please take out your phones now, it's not rude, and text that number with both the summit information and to enter the giveaway. And so I'll know the difference if you just say your name solely, it's the giveaway, and if you want to attend, add a number. And then the next is if you had a great conversation or took a photo or whatever you did, please tweet with the hashtag BrainCrawl. It would be pretty cool if every person who went through this event sent something out and we could just amplify everything we heard and saw today. And then the last one, a big thank you to eTown. So we had, I think, around 300 people, a wait list of 50 plus trying to get into this event. And so eTown at the last minute allowed us to have this venue out of the kindness of their hearts. And so a good way that you can support them is to go back downstairs, purchase something from the bar area has food and beverages, and also just continue the conversation and see more of Impact Founder's amazing art that's down there and the virtual reality if you didn't get to check that out. So please do one of these 3 things. And I hope to see you all downstairs. I think our speakers, some of them will be down there too to talk as well. Thank you.